mighty. The Lord can quench the evil flame. Peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees. Jehovah knows. He is my peace when sorrow nears. Jehovah sees. Jehovah hears. Feel the presence of God upon the waters. Hear the voice of the Lord within the thunder that rolls. King of the flood, the Lord is mighty. The Lord can calm the troubled soul. Peace when trouble goes. Jehovah sees. Jehovah knows. He is my peace when sorrow nears. Jehovah sees. Jehovah hears. Like the bread I need to live. Jehovah takes. Jehovah gives. Gives me peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees. Jehovah knows. Yeah. Judgment coming, He is my peace. Man pursue me, He is my peace. Judgment is coming, He is my peace. War may follow, but I know He is my peace. Yes, He is. The Prince of Peace is His name. King of the flood, the Lord is mighty. The Lord can quench the evil flame. Peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees. Jehovah knows. Jehovah hears. Oh my God, He is. Like the bread I need to live. Jehovah takes. Jehovah gives. Gives me peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees. Jehovah Jesus is our peace, amen. is his name. King of the flood, the Lord is mighty. The Lord can quench the evil flame. Peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees, Jehovah knows. He is my peace when sorrow nears. Jehovah sees, Jehovah hears. Feel the presence of God upon the waters. Hear the voice of the Lord within the thunder that rolls. King of the flood, the Lord is mighty. The Lord can calm the troubled soul. Peace when trouble goes. Jehovah sees, Jehovah knows. He is my peace when sorrow nears. Jehovah sees, Jehovah hears. Like the bread I need to live. Jehovah takes, Jehovah gives. His peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees, Jehovah knows. Yeah. Judgment coming, he is my peace. Man pursue me, he is my peace. Judgment is coming, he is my peace. War may follow, but I know he is my peace. Yes, he is. Sword, the Prince of Peace is his name. King of the flood, the Lord is mighty. The Lord can quench the evil flame. Peace when trouble blows. Jehovah sees, Jehovah knows.
Good evening and welcome everyone to this session as we pause to learn some more about how we can all cope with grief, or how we may show sympathy and express sympathy to those who are grieving in our midst. We are so happy to have you join us. As you all know, we are in a special time in history when grief seems more real than ever before. So yes, we all are acquainted with grief, and we were acquainted with grief before, let's say 2020. But somehow it has, and for some, it has become more overwhelming in recent times. We are also aware that grief and loss are not only connected to death, but we can also grieve the death or loss of a job, a relationship that falls apart. We can grieve over our health condition, among many other possibilities. However, today we will focus on grief brought about by death of a loved one, death of anyone, a friend, a family member, someone we care about. The book of Psalms is filled with words of comfort for any and every situation. And later on, we will share from Psalm 46. But let's listen now as we are comforted as we reflect on the reckless love God offers us.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love, God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. We are reminded in Psalm 46 that God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help us in times of trouble. And as one version reminds us, an ever-present help in times of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. The word of the Lord. We continue in prayer. God of love, the one who loves us unconditionally without reservation, without counting the cost. We come before you this evening with hearts of gratitude and thanksgiving for who you are, always remembering whose we are. We thank you that you are with us even now, O God, that you are with us and you know our anxious thoughts, our desire to be comforted. You know what lies ahead, and your presence never leaves us nor forsakes us, even though we feel so alone at times. Reassure us, O Lord, even through this session, that you will supply all our needs, whether emotionally, physically, or spiritually, regardless of what we face. And even in times when we want to abandon you and give up on life, when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We thank you now for the knowledge you're about to impart to us through your servant Elizabeth. And we pray that we may have receptive hearts and clear minds. We pray all this through your Son, who himself experienced death and is acquainted with our suffering. Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. My brothers and sisters, welcome again to this session. For those who are just joining us, we welcome everyone who has paused to join us today as we reflect on the topic, coping with grief. Today we have with us Dr. Elizabeth Crossman-Nugent, a very able and competent speaker on the topic. Elizabeth Crossman is head of the psychiatry department at the Cornwall Regional Hospital and is the regional consultant psychiatrist at the Western Regional Health Authority since 2004. She completed her secondary education at Morants Bay High School and Wolmer's High School and attained her Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery at the University of the West Indies, Mona. And then she went on to specialize in psychiatry, attaining her Doctor in Medicine in Psychiatry from the University of the West Indies in Mona. She has participated in several workshops locally, regionally, and internationally, and is a member of the International Society of Substance Use Professional. She was commissioned in 2013 as a captain in the Jamaica Cadet Force. She's a Christian and is married to DeVere, and together they parent Jordan, Joel, Joy Noel, Johnny, and Josiah. She enjoys outdoor activities, loves having fun and exploring new ideas. Those who are with us on Zoom and those who are with us on YouTube, help me welcome Dr. Elizabeth Crossman. And as we go into the session, we remind you that you are encouraged to share your questions and comments in the Zoom or YouTube chat, or simply use the raise hand feature to indicate if you have a question or comment. Dr. Elizabeth Crossman-Nugent, welcome.
Thank you very much for the welcome, and welcome everybody. I do hope as we share together that we will be able to leave with some good tips and work together to make coping with grief not a negative, but some positive outcomes will come from it. I am going to be sharing my screen at this time. as I have a presentation prepared. Okay, so we're going to be, let me get it on slideshow. We're going to be dealing with coping with grief, and thank you, Mademoiselle Arlene, for that welcome, and also for giving us some insights as to how we're going to proceed. I'm sure that most of us are not immune to having loss and experiencing grief. And I know some of us may have some stories, but how do we tell our stories, and how do we deal with whatever has happened in those stories is very important, because it will either give us some positive assurance or cause us not to be able to deal in a good manner, in a good way, with what has happened or what has transpired through our lives throughout the years. So in a way of introduction, I want to bring to us that grief is not something that we go lightly on. It is coping that is very important, and it is one of life's biggest challenge, because no matter how we prepare, whenever that time comes, whether it is loss of someone, whether it is loss of a job, whether it is loss of a spouse, loss of a pet, loss of security, whatever happens, it is not very easy to cope with at first. It becomes a bit challenging. So I believe that whatever your loss, it's personal to you, and we encourage persons not to feel ashamed about how you feel, or believe that it is inappropriate or only appropriate to grieve for certain things. And some of us really make people feel bad. Oh, your dog dead and that's how you're behaving. So, it becomes, some persons shy away from expressing. And so it becomes an internal problem for individuals. And it will cause other stress-related illnesses later in life if it is not dealt with properly. So it's normal to grieve the loss you're experiencing. And this is something we always tell persons, because a lot of persons tend to want to come to the psychiatrist because they just had a death and they're crying a lot, they're not sleeping, they're not eating. It is normal to grieve. And we encourage persons to go through that normal process, because what we want to ensure is that there's a healthy way to cope with the pain. And that's what we can guide you with. And that's what a lot of persons can guide you with. So there's some special knowledge that needs to be there
It appears we have lost our presenter for a moment. Let us just give her a few minutes.
promise we can make, every prayer and step of faith, every difference we have made is only by His grace. Every mountain we will climb, every ray of hope we shine, every blessing left behind is only by His grace. Grace alone, which God supplies, strength unknown He will provide. Christ in us, our cornerstone, we will go forth in grace alone. Every soul we long to reach, every heart we hope to teach, everywhere we
As we know, technology is unreliable, and we have Dr. Crossman back with us. Go ahead, Dr. Crossman, you can continue. We apologize for the break in transmission.
My apologies, everybody. Okay. Okay. So I was speaking about grief and what grief was, a natural response to loss, the emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Often the pain of loss can be very overwhelming, and persons will experience a wide range of emotions, from shock or anger to disbelief, guilt, and profound sadness. So it is internalized process, unique to each person, and can occur after death or a loss. And unlike mourning, which is an outward expression, grief may or may not be outwardly expressed. And we're going to look at some of the symptoms. So these are some of the things that can happen for somebody. These losses can happen that can present with grief, a loss of a cherished dream, one who has a serious illness and is knowing or preparing themselves because they think that death is inevitable, a loss of friendship, a loss of safety after trauma, loss of possessions, other causes, job loss, health challenges, loss of financial stability, miscarriage, whether it's intentional or unintentional, retirement, death of a pet. And of course, the most challenging one, the loss of a loved one or loss of someone. So we can have different emotional symptoms. We have the shock and disbelief, the sadness, and number one, a lot more persons are going to be presenting with sadness. Guilt feelings, whether you didn't do something or you did something and you regretted it before the person passed. And of course, fear of the unknown, fear of what is going to happen after the person passes or at the passing of the individual. So a lot of fear may be there as well. And of course, grief can be to a lot of other emotions. So mention the sadness, the heartache, the loneliness. And of course, you can have some mental health symptoms that may present. And sometimes they are new in onset. Sometimes they may be there before and are worsened. And depending on what has caused the loss, if it is something that is very traumatic, then you can end up having symptoms leading to post-traumatic stress disorder. You may have sleep disorders, eating problems, depression, anxiety. Other mental health conditions can exacerbate, so your psychotic disorders, your other your mood disorders. Persons may suffer from withdrawal, so they are no longer talking to individuals, they're no longer socializing, no longer interested in play for children, no longer interested in school, no longer interested in going out with friends. And of course, there can be physical aches and pains. And these are normal, what we call somatic symptoms, because the persons present with all these aches and pains, and all the investigations will prove that everything is fine with the body. So the pain of grief can, of course, cause the physical health to be disrupted. And just remember that these are normal reactions to loss, and the more significant the loss, the more intense your grief will be. So if you are grieving, we really don't expect you to be sleeping and eating okay for most persons. And you may have some difficulty thinking straight. It is quite normal. It is quite normal reactions. You can have other physical symptoms, becoming easily exhausted, having nausea, feeling as if you want to throw up. Your immune system goes down. There's weight loss or weight gain. So you're either eating too much or you're eating too little. We mentioned the aches and pains again, and the insomnia. So as you see, a lot of these symptoms are quite recurrent, and a lot of persons are going to be having these symptoms whenever they are grieving. I want to just look briefly at styles of grief, because a lot of times persons get very worried when individuals may not express grief as they think they should be doing. And so the styles of grief, although linear, is not hard and fast, because it means that persons may be on the continuum expressing in different ways, or at different points in time, they may show one style from the other style. So these are the styles. The first one is intuitive grief, and this is the grieving style where the person will express their feelings and emotions. So whatever is happening on the inside, you're going to be seeing it on the outside. So the sadness or the anger, the fear, whatever is happening, they're going to be expressing these emotions. And of course, they will tell you how they feel, and they'll tell you that, boy, I feel like a pain was down in my belly bottom, and I just couldn't breathe. I was screaming, I was on the floor, I was rolling. This is intuitive grief. Then there's instrumental grief. And usually this is where there's a suppression of emotions. And what tends to happen is that this person becomes more physical. There's a more hands-on approach. You want to find a solution. They're more cognitive in their thinking, in their experience. So they keep, and usually they're actually doing a lot. So they're the ones organizing, putting things in place, getting things, or setting up the memorial. So these are the individuals who we would say are more instrumental grief. And although women may experience it, it is more seen as a more masculine approach, while the intuitive is seen as a more feminine approach. So we can understand some of the things. So it's not that they are not grieving, it's just that the style of grief, how they channel their grief in these ways, allow them to just keep going, to keep doing things. Just a little bit on the stages of grief. And not that these stages are hard and fast, because it's not like you go through one and then through the other. They can all happen at the same time, but just to be mindful of them, and that these things do happen. And once we can understand what these stages are, then we are better able to ensure that we are understanding a little better, understanding the individual, and better able to cope and to manage. So this was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the 1960s that came up with these stages of grief. The first is denial, and we see it also often. This can't be happening to me. Why me? Why no? What did I do? You know, this is not real. So it is a temporary response, and it is so set up as a defense mechanism, because it is really helping us to process the hurt. And in a way, because we are denying very slowly, we bring back things into reality. And when we do that in a very slow manner, the resurfacing of these truths, we are better able to manage them. I'm sorry. So it is a way of managing or grief. So denial is the first stage. Then there is anger. Who is to blame? Why is this happening? Obviously, this a lot. You know, you never carried him to the hospital on time. You forget the medication. You never provide the finances. You are the one driving the car when the accident happened. And so the blame starts and the anger starts. And a lot of times the anger may not only be directed to other persons, but if we're spiritual, we can direct it to God as well. Where is God in all of this? Where were you when I was calling on you? Why didn't you do something for me? I was praying and I really did everything, and this is what happened. So we get very angry. Then there's a bargaining. And this, in a way, is what we call the false hope, because people will now say, boy, God, do this for me. Save my child. And if you save my child, you know, I'll serve you. I'm going to change. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop smoking. So do this thing for me. I'm going to do a lot more. I'm going to take care of my mother more. So a lot of bargaining starts happening. And also guilt is a part of the bargaining, because we know going to say, you know, the what if statements. What if I'd done this? What if I'd driven? What if I'd waited 5 minutes? You know, so all of this starts happening to the individual. Of course, depression, not depression as we call clinical depression, but the overwhelming feelings of sadness, emptiness, when we are living in reality and realize that the person or the situation is gone or over. And persons may withdraw from life. They may feel numbness, not want to get out of bed. They don't want to face the world. They think that things are too overwhelming, don't want to be around others. And of course, they feel hopeless, they feel worthless, but they don't really meet the clinical depressed stage, but they are feeling down. Then there's a point of acceptance. And this now is the stage where persons are beginning to accept that there is a reality to the loss. And there now that you have the stabilization of emotions begin to happen. They start recognizing that this is now a new reality, and there is a time of adjustment and readjustment that is coming. It's not that they are not grieving still, they have not forgotten about the individual, but that they have now come to a reality that, listen, this is a part of life, and I have now accepted it, and I'm willing to move on. Okay. So there are some challenges with grief. So a lot of people go through this stage, a lot of persons have some symptoms and signs, and for some may not be coping well. And these are some of the challenges. We do have what we call complicated grief. And this is where now this starts now to interfere with the person's daily functioning. So it's not the length of time that you're grieving, but really how the symptoms have gone on for so long until now it is affecting the person's daily functioning. And we become a little, we want to be a little cautious here, because it may mean that we need to seek professional help for the individual. And it's what tends to happen, you may notice that they become preoccupied with the deceased or with the circumstances. They don't want to engage in any happy memories. They want to avoid any reminders. There's a reduced sense of identity of who they are. They become very isolated, detached from friends and families, and they're what we call the anhedonia steps in. Their normal pleasure activities. They don't want to get involved. So they used to sing on the choir. They used to do the Bible studies. They may used to go out with friends. They are not doing that anymore. This other one is called the disenfranchised grief. And this is another challenge to grief, because now what tends to happen is that the individuals cannot grieve, they cannot mourn, they cannot express any of the grief signs, because the internal grief signs, because in a way there's some stigma if they are mourning, or there's a refusal to acknowledge that they too have suffered a loss. And some of these disenfranchised grief, if there's a devaluing of the loss, so loss of the pet, it's a little mongrel dog, man, what are you crying over this pet for? Or throw it, what is it with this cat? So, you know, the devaluing of the loss. The loss is ambiguous. So therefore, the person has not died. So for example, the person with dementia, the person has not died, but just that the person is no longer connecting to the individual, and that becomes a loss in itself. And, you know, persons may have to put on a brave face and not be able to express themselves. If the loss is a miscarriage, persons may be blamed to say that you caused it on yourself, you were the one who did this. So, you know, that the stigma that is associated with the loss, persons may not want to speak about it. The relationship to the deceased, not recognized, so like spouses, and if you're a co-worker and you're very close to the individual, you know, more family and the closer friends are taken into the picture, and you are not acknowledged, your grief is not acknowledged, the loss is not acknowledged for you. And of course, in children, a lot of times we put them aside to say that they're not understanding, they don't know what is going on. And so we have sort of restricted their way of mourning and also their expression of their grief because of that understanding that we have. So that's a disenfranchised grief. The other challenge we have at times is what is depression and what is grief? And we know that grief is not a disorder. However, the signs and symptoms can mimic a major depressive episode. And so, though it is not clinical depression that we see a lot of times in grief, we have to be mindful that because the symptoms are there, if there are certain red flags that we must look out for, and I'll discuss that later. We also need to bear in mind that if the person already has an underlying clinical depressive disorder that is diagnosed, and sometimes it may not be diagnosed, it can worsen the depressive episode or prolong any recovery from the depression. So these are certain things that we need to watch out for. So it means that if we have a friend, if we are the individual, and we recognize that I'm not coping so well, my function is not, I'm not doing so well, and this on top of it is making things worse, it means we need to seek professional help. I brought in mourning and culture because we are very unique in the way we express our grief, and that comes from a lot of our African retention, and our expressions have been sort of tempered by COVID, the restrictions and the fact that the protocols that are in place, and you begin to wonder if persons are not able to mourn, to express the outwardly what is happening on the inside, and not only that, but also, you know, the talking with the neighbor, the sharing, the fact that you have the support and seeing the support around you. We begin to wonder if that can have an impact on individuals and how long they are in the grief process. So what are some of the red flags? So we are seeing the person is grieving, and we recognize that there's a change in personality. This person who was once bubbly and alive has become withdrawn, is not talking to anybody, is not eating, and this is going on for months or for weeks. When we expect that they should have been doing a little bit better, coping a little better, we notice that they are not improving, and so they can no longer go back to work. They're not sleeping so well. You notice that they're not showering. They're not meeting their hygienic needs. So we begin to think this is a red flag. The decrease in functioning, the once active individual no longer wants to go to work, no longer wants to help in the house, no longer wants to go to the farm. If they have the farm, or no longer wants to be around the yard and be active in doing things. So we become very interested. If they start hearing voices or seem to be responding to voices or things that they are seeing that others can't see, that is a big red flag for us. Their thoughts of self-harm, and they have actually had a plan. They have mapped out a way in which they're going to harm themselves. You have seen some of the behaviors. That's a red flag for us. If they are not thinking rationally, and we know that some of that might happen early, but you start recognizing that no, he's missing some things, he's not remembering things, he's putting things where they're not supposed to be. You can't understand what he's saying because it's not making any sense. The language not coming together, then that becomes a red flag for us. The blood pressure is sky high, the sugar not going down. They have a mental illness and they seem to be worsening, and despite they're on their good and appropriate treatment, that becomes a red flag as well. So when we see these red flags, this is the time that we need to ensure that professional help is sought in an urgent manner. All right, so these are some emotional symptoms that can be found in prolonged or complicated grief. And this is from the Mayo Clinic. So there's increased irritability, which can go along with your personality changes, the numbness, becoming very bitter, very detached, and becoming very preoccupied with the loss. And there's inability to show or experience joy. And these symptoms that we see, we become very concerned about them. And we believe that the professional help should be sought for these individuals. I want to bring to you the ball in a box analogy by Lauren Herschel that speaks to grief. It's not, it has been criticized, but it gives a picture that I want us to look at for better understanding of what grief is and how it is that we differ in how we respond and in how we cope with whatever is happening and whatever is happening to us. So it starts with a ball in a box, and the box represents life and all the challenges and all the stressors, whatever is happening in life. And the ball actually represents the grief. There's actually a red button that's there that represents the pain. And the ball is randomly moving in the box. So when grief occurs, this ball is moving randomly in the box, which means that because it is almost the size of the box, it is going to be touching this pain button very regularly. And every time it hits the pain button, it means that we are going to be experiencing some symptoms. So this is what happens when at the start of the grieving process. What is expected to happen is that the ball is going to get smaller. Some persons believe that we are able to embrace more of life. And so it's not that the ball gets smaller, but the box gets a little bigger. And because of that, the hitting of the pain button is not as frequent as before. And so because it is not hitting the pain button so frequently, there's a breather between each hit. And so the individual is able to process and able to manage the grief in a more realistic manner. So this is what happens. The ball gets smaller or the box gets bigger. And so the frequency in hitting the pain button is no longer there. What this slide is showing is that at different stages, persons are going to be the ball is going to be at different points in. So everybody is not at the same stage in the grieving process. So in a family, if you think of a family, everybody will not be at the same point. And so that becomes you have to understand that so that we meet persons at the points at where they are able to cope with their grief. How long, how deep is the pain? There are several factors that will influence the severity and duration of the active grief. One, how was the relationship of the griever to the deceased? So the closer you are, the more painful it becomes, and also the severity might be more severe. How the person died, unexpected, natural death versus a violent unexpected death, and we can understand it's not expected, it's very violent. It means that that's going to be even more painful to some individuals than to others. So the way the person goes also becomes a means of determining what is going to happen in terms of how we accept the loss. There's difficulty in accept the loss, the type of loss, whether death versus divorce, job loss, or loss of physical abilities. And although I'm speaking generally, for some persons, some of these things may actually be that they don't deal with other things. So we may be saying that, well, if a person dies, it may be worse than the divorce. It may not happen for some persons. So generally speaking, this may happen, but for some persons, this may not happen. A previous loss or multiple losses. So if you have one loss, and just imagine that ball in the box, and you have one loss, and the ball is hitting at the pain button, and then the other week there's another family member, and we can understand it in the context of even your church with the several losses, or a family who has had several losses in this time, and we can see how intense the pain can be, how severe the pain can be for them. If you have other stressors, so you have a job loss, you have a child who has run away, you're dealing with your blood pressure and your diabetes, you have some financial stressors, you have the stress of the husband, and then you have a loss on top of it, then you can understand that it can become quite difficult to deal with. The cultural context, if it is that you have a culture that supports, that allows you to mourn, that provides that outlet for you to cope in a positive, in a healthy way, then you're going to realize that it is going to be a little bit better than a very adverse sort of cultural situation. The personal beliefs and outlook on life, and the studies have shown that persons who are of a spiritual belief actually do much better coping with even preparing themselves for death. So even the stages of grief that happens there, and also if they have a loved one that died, they tend to do much better than those persons that do not have that spiritual background and cushioning in life. So how do we cope with grief? We have to give ourselves time. A lot of times we rush into things and we believe that, and a lot of persons say, oh boy, you can snap out of it. You believe in God and you have the word and you believe that there is life and there's life after death. And the saying is to live is Christ and to die is gain. So this is not too bad for you, man. But all of us grieve in different ways, and we have to understand who we are and our expressions of emotions and how we cope with these expressions. So we have to give ourselves time. We have to accept how we are feeling. It's very interesting that a lot of us as Jamaicans, we are not able to identify our feelings, because if we're able to identify our feelings, we're able to cope a little better. So to accept our feelings means that we first have to be able to identify our feelings, whether we are sad, whether we are angry, whether we are frustrated, whether we are just tired and can't deal with it anymore. So accepting our feelings, and we know that grieving is a process, it is a normal process, and give ourselves time to deal with the process. Talk to others, spend time with friends and families, don't isolate yourself. And sometimes you may say to me, boy, them just too negative, we can't manage them. And perhaps that is true. And so it means that you may have to seek out persons who will give you that positive reinforcement, that you can talk to, that can support you, that can give you those positive coping skills. Take care of yourself. It's not very easy, because whenever the loss occurs, you don't want anything to eat. You feel drained. you really don't want to talk to anybody, you don't want to sleep, you can't sleep, you have difficulty going back to your routine of keeping yourself healthy. But I always tell the clients, baby steps. And that's how the baby steps. It's not easy, but baby steps, very good. And also if you have a good friend, a good close friend that will walk with you through these steps, then that would make it even more manageable for you. Going back to activities that bring you joy, so you have forgotten about them because right now you're dealing with something. You can't think about going to choir practice. Well, choir practice is no more, but you can't think about going on Zoom and talking to your friends. You can't think about watching your favorite movie or your favorite series. So it takes time, but we always say, you know, take your time, baby steps. So it may mean that if you need to crochet, if you were good at crochet and that's what you love to do, you may have been doing like 200 stitch a minute or whatever. So you probably can do 2. That's very good. And you commend yourself because, you know, it's not very easy to go back. So you take your 2 and you go 4 and then you go 6. And then by the time you look, you're going back to your normal pace. But it does take time. If you have a support group, so you have persons probably on WhatsApp, on your Zoom, on Twitter, on, you know, who you talk to, who would share a prayer request, or they have a prayer meeting or something, or you may have your neighbors, and you know, you have that support group, probably you walk together, probably you have you do a little meeting, you know, or you talk together, those support groups. You may also have persons who you know, or persons who will reach out to you, who may have had a loss and they have gone through the same process. And so they are able to guide you to understand a little bit more, to empathize with you. And so they can walk in your shoes. And so they are able to guide you through the grieving and you feel a little bit more connected. What are some of the other things that you can do? Allow yourself space to feel your emotions and recognize them. Sometimes we have to create a personal space. Probably it's in the bathroom at 3 o'clock in the morning because everybody else, you know, take up all the space in the house because there's no time to go out anymore. Or probably you may find a little spot in the garden or under the mango tree, but create that personal space for reflection and prayer. And you may, one of the things that we recommend also too is journaling, writing down your thoughts, how you're feeling, and not just writing down how you're feeling, but what it is that you're doing to help some of those negative thoughts or those thoughts that distract you or make you feel down, right? Take comfort with positive words, scripture. Sometimes when these things happen, we can't even remember the Lord is my shepherd. And so it becomes a little difficult at first. And so the uplifting songs, some of us have songs on the phone, some of us listen to the radio, those may help us, or we may go back and, you know, open the Bible and start reading through, or get in our songbook and start reading through, or probably that bulletin that you had from 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ago, and you open it and it brings back some positive words to you, so you can take comfort through them. I also need to remind us, we love the social media platforms, but they can be very devastating at times, and especially if our love, the tragedy is blasted on social media and people love to comment, and sometimes it can be quite brutal and negative. So we have to be mindful of the social media platforms and the persons that sometimes we interact with, that sometimes give us, well, they think they're giving us comforting words and really upset us. So we have to be mindful of those situations at times. We need to rely on our go-to coping mechanisms, which means that prevention is key. It means that we have to have some coping mechanisms, whether it is breathing, whether it is walking, whether it is reading, whether it is taking time in the bath, taking a long bath, whether it is being part of a prayer group, a mechanism that will help you to deal with any negative happenings in your life. You can express your feelings in tangible or creative ways. So let's say you find that, boy, I'm not sleeping and I'm feeling worried. You may decide that, okay, let me draw something. If you're an artist, and probably that will bring out your feelings. You're going to do journaling, and that will also bring out those feelings. And then looking back, you're able to say, oh, I was feeling that way because if we can label our feelings, say why we were feeling that way, and then look at some positive ways to put in. It means that whenever these negative feelings come, then it becomes like a knee-jerk response for us to start thinking positively and help us to cope a little better. Give yourself grace. A lot of times we blame ourselves. A lot of times we become upset with ourselves because we break down at unexpected moments, because we expect the birthdays and the anniversaries and probably some little events that are key markers. But at some other point, something may happen. Somebody may come out in a red dress and you suddenly remember your friend, oh boy, she loved red, and that is just the killer there, and you start crying. And you become, and you start, chastising yourself. Boy, I'm stupid, man, we're just a ball. So give yourself that grace, give yourself the understanding, and allow yourself to grieve in that manner, because that's quite normal, and it occurs quite often as well. So what are some of the coping skills that I want to leave with us? Positive reframing. We want to look at the person that has passed, and we want to look at those aspects that you may still connect, that will connect you with the person. Probably there's a bond that you share. You probably used to walk together. You probably used to talk about all sort of foolishness together. You maybe if that was the person that taught you to swim, probably it's a grandfather that used to carry you to school. So you focus on appreciating those aspects that you can still use to connect with the person. So it's a positive reframing. We are taking that, we know that the person has passed, but we are looking at those things that we can focus on in a way and ensure that it brings out the positive things of that individual. Humor. Laughter is the best medicine. So focus on the funny memories, and I'm sure you have a lot of funny memories that you'd have with your individuals that have passed. Watch your favorite comedy and look at funny pictures. You may have some snapshots that you take on your phone, or you have them, or that was sent you. Look at the funny pictures from the past, and what it does, it helps to hold on to more positive emotions, even if temporarily, that you may bring some relief to cope. So laughter is good, so hold on to those positive, funny memories. We need to focus our perspective. So these are things that we can do. Look at the wider picture. Instead of contemplating on the immediate situation, we need to look at the wider picture. Try focusing on aspects that goes beyond the loss. So what it is that we are learning from this loss, or from the person or the event itself. So perspective, yes, can be relative, but if we are able to focus in a positive way, then we are able to reframe, and we are able to even cope a little better. So remember, we're looking at coping skills. Problem solving. Remember, I know we're talking about loss of loved ones, but we also need to remember there are other losses. And even though we're given coping skills for loss in general, it's very important to remember that not all grief is related to irreversible loss. And sometimes the loss in itself is asking us to reflect, to take stock, and to solve problems to improve our outcome. So for example, a long-term relationship We may need to straighten up our lives. We may need to refocus, probably look at why did I not go back to college and upgrade myself, and think about that. Think about rearranging your house, probably looking at separating ties, bank accounts. So it gives us a time to problem solve. And of course, spirituality, very, very important. As I mentioned before, the studies are showing that persons with a good spiritual foundation tend to do much better with coping, even in their own physical health deterioration, and also in grief. So, and a lot of us, we will use the scriptures, we will have favorite songs that will help us and guide us. So this is one. We do not want to be, brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. 1 Thessalonians 4:13-14. So giving persons hope, and having them reflect that there is life after, then that in itself can also enhance their coping skills. So two practical tips I think I'll leave with you. Here's what I call the bereavement box. And this is a box that, and it can be anything. You can store, you can make it. That could be a craft, a creative way to do it. You may get an old shoe box, and you're going to repurpose the box. And what you're going to be doing is taking special items that can fit in the box that will remind you of the individual. And so for a father, you might think of a tie, a favorite tie, a tie that you would always wear. You may not have big items. You can't put a car in the box, but you can take a picture of his favorite car, the car that you always drove, and when you always see that car coming, it reminds you of your father. And you can take a picture and put that in the box. You may have photos of you and your father doing something, and you'd like that memory, and that memory goes in the box. The same thing can go for mother. When it comes to infants, you may have an infant who is not doing well and the prognosis is not good. Then they will normally allow you to take like a lock of hair. You may take the band from the hospital, the wristband. If you are able to get photos before the child passes, a photo of the child, or anything that's probably the first suit that the child put on in terms of the whatever the child wore when the child was born. So, things like this you can put in the box. And for a child, a favorite toy, a blanket, a photo. So these are things that you can put in the box. And what it does, it sort of gives you something to hold on to. And sometimes when you're feeling down and you feel like those memories are coming back, you go back to the box and you can look at this memory, and it can, bring you back to thinking about the individual, but in a positive way. There's also one tool I found called the goodbye letter. And this is a letter that you're writing to the individual, telling them goodbye. And this, I think, would come more at the point where there is acceptance of that stage of grief, where there is acceptance. And it may be that the person would have been anticipating the grief that is to come. So a child or a mother who is terminally ill and is saying goodbye, or you have lost someone and you are saying goodbye. And what it does, it allows us to reflect on our loved ones and to look at the positive things and to say how we want to remember the individual. And in that positive way, we are able to, associate more, have that perspective, and to cope a little better with the loss. So in summary, we want to remember that grief is a normal reaction. Different persons will grieve differently, and the duration of grief will also vary in different persons. There are coping skills that will help persons in managing the grief with positive outcomes. And grief can be complicated and challenging, and red flags signal the need. Red flags will signal the need for professional help. These are my references. I want us to remember this is a popular song that we all sing, It Is Well With My Soul by Horatius Spafford, a very interesting story of a businessman who was married to Annie, his wife, and they had 5 children, lost the first child a few years, and sent on his wife to England on a ship. And while crossing the Atlantic, the ship hit a Scottish vessel, and he lost the 4 other children and his wife. He was to join them later because he had some emergency, so that's why he wasn't with his family. And the wife sent a telegram to say to him that she was saved alone. And this, on going back from England and passing the spot where the 4 children drowned, he penned this song. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Just reminding us, there's no health without good mental health. And I want to thank you for your attention. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was a lot of food for thought, a lot for us to ponder, a lot for us to think about, a lot for us to process, and especially for those who are grieving, and which many of us are over periods of time. It is a lot for us to learn from. So we want to open up the floor now for questions, comments, what persons might want to say about this session in terms of getting feedback from the audience. Those on YouTube may submit their questions and comments in the chat, and those who are on Zoom may raise their hand so we can acknowledge them and they can share. Not presently seeing any comments or questions so far. So I wanted to pose to you the question of how do we support those who are grieving? How would you assist us in answering that? And that is something that we all have to deal with. What do we say? What do we not say? What is appropriate? What is not appropriate? We struggle with that.
Yeah, we do struggle with it. And I think because we're coming from a Christian perspective and we believe that, God is in control. So don't worry yourself, sister. Things are right. And people get upset and things not all right. My heart a break, man. What happened? What got there? So people are struggling. I think, and I've always believed that we have to train individuals in grief counseling because it is not something very easy, because a lot of persons don't understand why you can't say certain things and why people get upset and why people should not be upset because you say certain things. And so I think a lot of times we are not able to read people's emotions. We are not able to understand where they are. And it's not very easy to sit on a platform and say, okay, don't say such and such and don't say such and such, because it may not go for that individual at all. I remember a couple of years ago when one of my classmates passed away, and we thought that, we were grieving so badly because we saw him like the weekend before and then the Monday morning to hear that he's in the ICU. And we said, okay, we're not going on ICU, because we can't deal with them, the stress right now. And that was very devastating for the family, who just wanted, even if we said nothing, just wanted our presence there. So it's being able to read what persons want. So you go to support an individual and they just hug you and say, just hold me, just hold me. They really probably don't want you to be saying anything, because them can't deal with the talking right now. So I think it has to be some training that happens for individuals, and especially our counselors, our grief counselors, so that we are able to ensure that we are giving positive reinforcement, and because we are able to understand the emotions, and we are able to understand how persons are feeling, and so we are able to give proper advice.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand, Nigel Walters. Deacon Walters, please unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say a very timely, topic at such a time like this. I myself am grieving right now.
I'm so sorry to hear, and I can hear that in your voice as well.
Today is 10 days since I've lost my son.
Oh, so sorry.
In a very tragic accident.
Yes.
And today is the only day that I've so far not cried. And I keep questioning why. I've always believed that a parent should never be the one burying a child. But I didn't know that I would live to experience this. But I pray God would give me the strength to live through it. But because it's hard. But with your help and some of your suggestions, you know, I think it might be possible. But how do you deal with something like this?
And you're a good testimony to say that it is, as I said before, it is not an easy feat at all. And I think you're also in a very challenging situation, because when you speak to parents, nobody wants to bury a child. It's very, very difficult, very, very hard to cope with. And especially if you have all those, you have seen the potential and the dreams, and you have the wishes, and, you know, it is a very challenging situation. So, and you are going through the stages of grief, as I can see, and you are seeing as well. And it is you're questioning, saying, you know, why? And this is very hard. And it is very hard, very challenging. You have a spiritual base that you have alluded to, but I think support is also very important. Support of family and friends. And I must commend you for being a part of this, this platform, because most persons would not, you know, even have the willpower to be a part of the platform because of how intense the grieving is. Not to say that your grieving is not intense, but the fact that you have been on the platform and that you have shared is also testament to what we have been speaking about. So, or coping with grief is not very easy at all. And even though you may think that you have it, it is not very easy whenever it really comes on your doorstep. So I would encourage you, and I'd encourage others who are here, who are very close to you, to be to form that bond of support. And one of the things that spoke about was that bereavement box, and perhaps when you're a little bit more able to be able to to set up that box so that the memories, the positive memories are there. And I'm sure you're not the only one, but there are others in your family, probably others in the church, his co-workers, if he's a working person, his friends, neighbors, you know, everybody is probably going through these trying stages at this time. And so
I don't know.
support is.
I was saying, I don't know if you heard about an accident in which 2 firemen perished on the
Yes.
north. One of those was my
Was your
son.
son. Okay, my condolences to you and your family, sir.
Thank you. And one of the things that you spoke about, that even I told my wife about the same thing. Even when you talk about the box, that's something that I have some memorabilia from, because he has 2 trophies, one from Ferncourt High School, and I think another one when he was going to went to Prospects.
Okay.
And he bought me a cup last month for my birthday. Very unique. Comes with a little spoon in the handle, and I say I'm gonna use those to make a memorable box.
Yes.
I will never use that cup.
Boy.
And there are some other things like his mask that he uses, his special fire brigade mask, some other things that I plan to put in. So
but Mr. Deacon Walters, I can feel your pain and I can understand what you're going through, because it is not very easy at all. And even though I see it every day, it doesn't become easier.
And then when you consider his age, because he was just 25 years old.
Yes. So the prospects, the hopes.
Yes.
I'm sure we continue to bear you up in our prayers as well, as I know it's not very easy. This walk is not very easy. And your wife and the rest of the family, because I know they must be grieving as well. But to tell you that the grief is quite normal. This is what is expected. We become a little bit worried if you're not, if you're losing a lot of weight and you become a little bit more depressed and you're not coping, you're not functioning, that's when we become a little bit worried. But this is quite normal for you at this time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for sharing, Deacon Walters. Comment from the YouTube chat. Grieving is a natural and healthy response to loss, but is there a point at which grief becomes unhealthy? This is from Reverend Jonathan Hemmings.
Yeah, I see that he joined us late on the platform, so I'll just go ahead and answer again. So, when grief becomes unhealthy, we had mentioned some red flags, and we had mentioned some complicated grief. And one of the things that we look for are changes in the person's personality. We look for an increase in self-harm, or whether in thought or disorder or in action behaviors. We also look at the person's function, impaired function. So the person who should be working is no longer working. They are not meeting their hygienic needs. You're not able to have a good conversation with them because their thought content and how they project or they put their thoughts across, not very focused at all. So we become very worried. They become very, very sad and hopeless and worthless. And they have what we call, they have become very slowed down. You may also find that they become very irritable. You can have a discussion with them. They may also be using substances, so increased use of substances, or they may never be using it, never started before. I know they have started using substances. You may also find that if it is that they have, or they're new onset, or they have physical or medical conditions and mental health conditions. You find that they are difficult to manage, so their blood pressure is in the sky, their blood sugar is in the sky, you cannot manage them, manage these conditions. Or if they were depressed before and they are worsened, or they were never depressed before and you're now seeing signs suggesting more that this is more than grief. This is going on for a very long time. Not only that, but you have the complications of this individual with all of these factors happening. Then these are now red flags, and this is time to seek. Well, you'd have seen some things before, so I hope you wouldn't wait until we reach right down to these red flags. And so therefore, this is now time to seek professional help. So I hope that answers Dr. Hemming's question, Reverend Hemming's question.
All right. We're gonna just pause a bit and listen to a musical item, and then we'll come back to a few more questions that are coming in. Persons can continue to submit their questions and comments or raise their hands.
My rock in whom I trust, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. The snare of the fowler will never capture you, and famine will bring you no fear. Under his wings, your refuge, his faithfulness, your shield, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And for to his angels he's given a command to guide you in all of your ways. Upon their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And hold you in the palm of his hand.
Amen. As we continue, we have a raised hand. I'll just read 2 comments before we take the question. From Yvonne Cato, Deacon Cato says, some people tend to get rid of things that remind them of loved ones. Is this normal? And the other comments are just in appreciation of the session and the information that we have received, and to say thanks to the presenter. We will address that question, and then we will take the raised hand from Glenroy Duncan.
Oh, hi. So it's to get rid of things that are of loved ones, and she's asking, is that normal? Am I correct?
That reminds them of the loved one.
Oh, that reminds them of the loved one. You know, and I probably should ask what get rid of mean, because for some individuals, they think that more persons would be appreciative of the things, whether clothing items or whatever, not to let them waste. So probably it's not really getting rid of. So I'm not so sure if that's what she means, giving away things for others to utilize, or get rid of, just throwing away and not being mindful of them. Because that would raise some questions for me if you're throwing away things like that, because it is saying something about the relationship. So I'm going to go with the fact that they may be actually allowing the loved ones' things to be used by others, and I see it almost as if those persons who whose loved ones may have passed, and they before or are on the verge of dying, and they have given up some of their body parts, their organs, for donation so that others can benefit. So I'm thinking that it's probably not getting rid of things, but also allowing others to benefit from the use of the articles that the loved ones possess.
But
so I'm hoping that
that
is the case.
Could it be during the anger stage or guilt stage that you would really want to just throw them out and not, having to see them, because it brings back the memories and the anger and probably, guilt. So at different stages, that might be a response.
But remember that anger is not angry at the loved one or the memory of the loved one. It's angry about why this has happened to me. So for somebody to be throwing out things for the loved one, it sort of raises questions about the relationship. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Glenroy Duncan, please unmute and go ahead.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. We're hearing you.
I thank you for sharing that wonderful presentation what you have just done.
Thank you, sir.
And even our deacon who just spoke to you a while ago.
Mm-hmm. I
am one of those persons who have to just keep on counseling as we go from time to time, because I lose a daughter, you see. Mm-hmm. And it's only God can carry me through. It's not just the accident, but yes, it's the condition which she have find herself in. Mm-hmm. Every section on our body, our neck break, our back break, our hand break, when our foot break, when our foot come off completely, our belly gush out, right? And I have to live with an empty room each day. I have to look in there, and she's not there. Mm-hmm. Or with a blood scar memory. Mm-hmm. So as you even said, certain things in the presentation, even when I have to pass that spot down by Duns River, as you mentioned before, the only thing I do, and I promise myself, just smile it off. Because if you keep on to allow what has happened, you would never be able to get over it. So I just saying thanks for encouraging me with that. And as you rightly said, it's not very easy to cope with. Very, very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I never have God within me, mm-hmm, and my faith wasn't so strong, I give up long time. Mm-hmm. but it's that keep me up to this very, very moment. I have a lot of friends on the street, and them said to me, say, Glenn, how you manage, brother? How you manage? Me say, listen, man, forget about me. It's God. God keep me true. I me try to live in such a way. I me try to uphold my family. Because if you know, if I fall, my family immediately family going fall as well. So it's just God have to just keep me going through this. It happened 5 years ago.
Right.
And I tell person said, what I've been through, I don't see nothing else at all. They can shake me. I go to the extreme with this. So I've just keep on encourage my friend Walter. Said each day I get up, man. Someday this year gonna make 5 years. And someday just have it like you have it, good as you say. And it just come on with a bang. Serious bang. So you're not going to get over it. So you have to just encourage yourself each day. It's not easy. You have to just trust God and ask God to keep you through them difficult and challenging days. Thank you for it.
And thank you too
Support.
for sharing, Mr. Duncan, because though how you described it, the picture was very, open there. It seemed as if it was just yesterday, and
but another section of it, it's out of my bed. Somebody come at the gate and just give it to me like that. Glenn, your daughter meet an accident and died. Just jump out of my sleep,
Yes, and that must have been very nerve-wracking.
If it wasn't for God.
Yes.
If it wasn't for God, I don't know how I would manage. It's God keep me through this. Nobody else could have keep me through this. So even when some trials and testing come, me say them a little trial and testing there, that can't stay. You understand? Because me go to the extreme, very, very extreme. And as I said, I just thank God for just keeping me through these difficult days. And I will continue to encourage my friend Walters.
Very good, sir, because that was what I was coming to say that support is very important. And
a lot of person never knows it, that was the extent of it. It's a terrible situation, man. Very, very.
Yes, it sounded
even,
that.
Even the burial, even when she's supposed to be buried, they have to use steel to put her back together to just keep her body in just a fixed position. You understand? So I know what I've been through. So I can't give up off of God. I cannot give up off of God because He brought me through this. So whatever other storm can come, that is minor to me.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you all, man. Thanks for your.
And thank you too, sir. And the fact that you have gone to and you're able to support your brother, that's even more commendable at this time.
Yeah, man. Me try and let him know, just like what he says. Someday you're gonna have it good, and another day it's just a bang on, and you will never. I am going almost 5 years now, and someday it's just it come like it happened yesterday. Someday I have it good, and the next day just bang on. And as I say, I live with that empty room each day. You understand? Where she in her room. And I have our photo of them all over the house. So therefore, that even more difficult and challenging.
Yes.
And just as a follow-up, there is, before we take Deacon Walters, and thank you, Deacon Duncan. Deacon Walters,
thank you.
There is a comment in the chat again, dealing with a similar issue. Daisy Sinclair shares, yes, it is very, very hard. I lost my child over 2 years ago. And sometimes it felt as if it was yesterday. Sometimes I feel like I am not normal because of having a suitcase of his stuff. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks for sharing, Ms. Daisy, because you see, a lot of times when we have these forum, persons, the support is there, but we never knew before, and persons sharing and giving how they actually dealt with the situation is very important, because one, we realize that we are not alone in the situation, and two, we have support, and persons who have gone through it are able to give us those tips and walk with us on the journey, and that's very encouraging. Yeah. So I guess we'll take Deacon Walters again, no? Your hand is up.
Yeah. Yes, I just want to say, thanks to my friend Glenn. He has been a tower of strength to me, and he can empathize with what I'm actually facing now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you talk to persons like those and they say they know what you're going through, they truly know what you're going through.
Yes.
But I have a question. I have not visited the crash site as yet. Would it be a good idea for me to go there and get a sense of closure?
All right, so closure comes in different forms, and avoidance at this point in time, because if you look at it this way, the crash site is always going to be there. So I would say to you that you do this in your own time, not to force yourself when you think you're prepared, and not only that, to go there if you think you can't manage by yourself, to go there with support, because a lot of persons in the initial stages would want to avoid going anywhere near the crash site, or avoid anything that reminds them of this incident. And that is quite normal. That's very normal. But if it is that you feel that you need to visit the site to get some closure, when I would say to do it in your time, and to do it when you think that you're ready, and even when you think you're ready, to make sure that you have the support with you to go there.
Okay, that's what I plan to do. I'm not going alone.
Right.
But my wife wanted to go there from the very next day, but I couldn't face it. And the reason why I have to go is that I'm in transportation, and just last week I had to pass up 2 jobs to go Montego Bay because I just couldn't pass there. But
passing it.
so I think the time is. I feel that I can manage to
you
face.
feel you can manage.
Yeah.
But also prepare yourself, Deacon Walters, that if you go and you realize that you're not managing, and probably even if you're going on a trip to Montego Bay and you have to pass, you may need to carry somebody with you, because you may not be able. A lot of times the pressure, we may feel that we can do it, but then it takes some time to get back into, passing and dealing with, coping with passing the area. The avoidance can be very difficult to manage, because it is a very traumatic situation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. We have another hand up, Mitzelyn Powell Richards. Go ahead, unmute Mitzi and speak.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Last year, October the 15th, my husband just walked out of the house to exercise, and he didn't come back. I got the news from a taxi man, and the moment I saw him at my gate, I felt in my spirit what happened, and I said to him, I told him exactly what happened, and to leave my house and to go up. When I went on the road and I saw my husband lying there, police police vehicle and everything there, and just to see him lying there under a sheet, and and that picture has never left my mind. even though each day I go on and I try to be strong and I try to be positive about everything, and because I have three small children,
Yeah.
I try to be positive about things. I notice that even though they are moving on, and it seems as if, but I notice when I leave home, they always call to find out where am I and if I'm okay and everything like that. Because I think it is still bothering to them, because to know that someone they saw the night before, and the next day they knew that he was no longer around. And that picture is still in my mind. It has never left me. I went to the autopsy. I was the one who identified him and
Identified.
everything. But I am I stood at the funeral, I looked at him in the casket. But those pictures are not with me really. I'm not seeing those pictures, but I can never forget. I can never forget that first morning, you know. And I am here with the kids most times alone, and sometimes whenever time I start feeling down and stuff like that, I try to find positive things to fill my mind. I listen to a lot of Joel Osteen, you know, I listen to a lot of spiritual things. I sort of change the things that I watch on television, and sort of focus more on God. And I believe that that is what has kept me. I try to ensure that my mental health, because I'm a teacher, so my mental health, I sort of look about my mental health. When I go online in the days with the children, it sort of, form of medicine I have fun with them, and those sort of keep the mind off things. But it is not easy. And people see me and they would say, "Oh, Mitzi, you are so strong, and how do you do it by and stuff?" But it's the grace of God. As I was listening to Deacon Duncan, it's only God. It's only God. I realize that most times I don't sleep through the night. I'm a light sleeper now. Um, I'm up most times I'm awake by say 2:30, 3:30, thereabout. But during that time, because if the kids are asleep and stuff, I would, pray, read my Bible, you know, listen positive things, positive things in order to keep my mind, you know. And even though in my downtime, I realized that God has used my situation for me to help others, because sometimes people will call me and need me to pray with them, and ask my advice on certain things. And I have to say, Lord, Mr. God, you're not easy, you know. The other day, my neighbor, his wife died. His wife died, leaving two young children. And it was a sudden death, just the same. And
Wow.
I said to him, I said, Marlon, you're going through, I went through my situation to help you. And I said to him, you are now going through your situation because you will have to help somebody else. So even though it's challenging, and there are still down times, I am still afraid to pass the area. Not afraid, but you know, whenever time I pass that area, anytime I go to Orchard and I'm coming back home and I have to pass that area, it brings something, because I have not been back to the area that my husband has been buried, and it is coming up to a year of his death. And a friend of mine is saying I should take the kids to the grave site and stuff. And I said to her, no, I'm not going. I'm not going back there. I'm never going back to that area. I'm never going back there. So I don't know if I'm wrong in saying it. I don't know if it is the hurt that is preventing me from going back to the area. And because my husband was a very popular person, popular, um, help a lot of persons. But sometimes when I reflect and I say, we are those persons, we are, and even his son and I we were laughing the other day and we say, can you imagine if he should come back now? I wonder if we said to him, we have not seen those persons any at all. They don't even call to find out how we are doing or anything like that. So, you know, there is still that underlying hurt, which I really pray about and ask God to free me of, because I don't want to have those baggages. You know? So I have to pray and ask God to keep me. And I really appreciate this forum, because I've never been to counseling. I've never been to a forum where I could express myself. But I'm so happy for this forum. And when I saw it, I said I have to go on it tonight. So I really appreciate this forum where I can express myself and, you know, and talk about it, because it really helps.
And Mrs. Powell Richards, you have also highlighted a lot of the coping skills that we spoke about, and I don't think you recognize that you did so, because you are speaking from the heart, you're not speaking from a textbook, you know. But you spoke about the spiritual aspect, the positive reframing, how you put the thing in perspective, your perspective focus change. You also spoke about the humor and how you are able to manage. And I must say to you that these are what I would call the grief and loss files, your stories, and how your stories, and you're saying how it has now helped your neighbor, and how it has helped others, and how it has built you as well. Because if you're going to remember anything that is tragic and traumatic, that is going to be etched in your memory, and that's why you're able to remember the details of what happened when you went to see your husband. But you're going to find that the pain, remember the pain box that we were talking about, as life expands and as you take on other things, because you have now taken other persons into your space, into what you're doing, you know, praying for others. You're taking better care of the children, meaning that you're more involved, you know. You're going to find that even though there is still that hurt and pain, it is not as intense as when that first morning that you were called out of your house. And that is showing that grieving is normal, and that the process really takes time. And probably if we had an older person on the line who spoke about a loss of a child, they're going to tell you that even now they can feel that loss of the child. So we know that it's not going to be totally obliterated. They're not going to have everything totally going away. You're still going, because of the way he died, the intensity and the severity is also going to determine, you know, what happens with that ball in that box for you. So I really appreciate your sharing, because it really brings perspective and shows persons that we're not really just talking about things in a book, but this is what really happens in real life. And the different individuals who are giving their input actually are bringing things to the fore, so that we can all learn and we can listen and we can develop our coping skills. Not that it's going to protect us from anything, because we're all going to have to grieve at some point in time, but at least the fact that you all three of you spoke, and persons on the YouTube spoke about the Christian perspective, the spirituality, the prayer, and the support of the brothers and sisters, puts us in a better light to be able to say that, yes, we have to have that support that really conditions and really grows individuals in the Lord. So I'm really glad for your opening up and sharing on this platform. I thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for sharing. We have a few comments in the YouTube, but we're going to take Reverend Hemmings, whose hand is up. Go ahead, Rev.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elizabeth. I did hear the entirety of your presentation. No, but the question I was asking, you know, is as it relates to prolonged grief. You know, people are a way of saying get over it, you know, and so it might be an ongoing thing. Doesn't manifest those red flags that you talk about.
Okay.
But, you know,
Okay.
persons are just grieving over time. I was interested in your expressing the need for persons to get to the point of acceptance. And I prefer that term over what other persons use when they say closure. I have my doubts about this concept about closure. You know, whether or not grief really maybe, you know, reduced intensity at points, but isn't it something that we're going to live with forever? And we just have to, you know, when you have suffered that kind of life. Right.
We're going to live with it forever, but what is going to be decreasing is the intensity of it.
Right.
And but prolonged grief is something else, you know. It means that the person is not at the point of acceptance, because that's where we want persons to be. And there are several things that could, as I mentioned before, that could complicate the grief. Probably there are some guilt feelings that are there that persons don't want to share about. Some persons may not have the support to be able to, you know, guide them. But I think one of the fundamental things that we have noticed is that persons are not able to express their feelings and to understand, well, first, and to identify their feelings. And therefore, if you're not able to identify your feelings, you're not able to understand the feelings and to cope effectively with these expressions. And so because of that, persons don't really get the help that they need because they're not able to express what is happening to them. And so the grief continues. Another thing, apart from being emotionally intelligent and being able to understand the emotions and express them and to, you know, to cope, is that a lot of persons really don't have the coping skills. Perhaps they may have had one or more episodes of trauma. They may have underlying mental health conditions that really have not been treated, and so it's difficult for them to cope. They may have other stressors, whether physical, financial, and so it's almost like grief on top of grief, and so it just keeps extending and extending, and you don't know how to cope, and it just keeps going on and going on, and so it can end up affecting their functioning. They become very irritable. They become some persons become withdrawn, and they may go on to develop other mental health conditions too. So it's one of the things that we really push is how do we develop the emotional skills, the coping skills, and we don't want to develop it from adulthood. We really want to teach children how to really identify their emotions, or to express them in a way that doesn't disrupt their lives, and how to cope effectively with these emotions whenever they have to express emotions that, you know, you need to, something has happened and they need to cope with, to have the coping skills to deal with these emotions. So a lot of things are in the mix. And I think a lot of times, perhaps ministers, pastors may actually be seeing some of this, but I think we may shy away from dealing with it, and it doesn't really help because persons tend to get worse and become even more difficult to manage if they are not helped early. I hope I've answered the question now. He's gone.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. Thank you much.
Okay, right. So as we are discovering, there's a lot to be said. There's a lot to process as we talk about grief, and everybody has had their own different experiences. And there's one comment on the chat: is it normal to grieve for over 10 years? And I think you may have touched that somewhat in terms of, you know, the process. what about, and I think this is in reference now to what the Deacon Duncan and go ahead.
Can I just say something? I think a lot of times say, is it normal to grieve? Probably we need to highlight what do we mean by grieving for 10 years. What do we mean by that? I don't think that the person is bawling like the first day the thing happened. I don't think that they're not eating, they're not sleeping. What do we mean by that? Because that becomes very important. Than to say not grieve, you have been grieving for 10 years. Because when we are able to pinpoint what is happening, we are able to better advise than to say, boy, this is not looking so good, this is not going so well, so probably they need some help here. Probably this is more than grief now.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to briefly indicate, when I finish just sharing some of what is left here. When we talk about getting help, some of the places that persons can look for help. And I see here a suggestion to that we need a grief ministry, which, interestingly, it's a work in progress that we are discussing right now for our ministry here. So that is a thought that is being developed right now. So we crave prayers for that. But where do persons really turn to for help? Because sometimes, yes, they need help. And even in these COVID days, where can this help come from when we are locked in and locked out, as it were? So one person is just referring to the fact that they have to pass that particular site on a daily basis because there is no other route, so they have to face it. And another parent says it's very hard to bury your child. It hits you very hard. It's 3 and 4 years now. It seems as if it's yesterday. But through it all, I've learned to trust in God. That's Sister Maria Patterson. So yes, these are some of the questions and comments that persons are sharing. And I'm sure we would love to continue for an extended time. I'm sure there are many persons who want to share. And we will try to provide the opportunity for continued dialogue where possible, as we said, in the form of a grief ministry. But your closing comments, thoughts, recommendations, Dr. Elizabeth.
Okay. So we have spoken about grief, and as I mentioned before, that this is a normal process, but we have to be mindful of the other, the complicated and the persons who are around us who are not doing too well. And so it is very important that in this time, especially because we're not seeing each other, and that becomes also another challenge, we need to, the cause, how we can interact even a bit more, because I know we're talking about the loss of loved ones, but one of the challenges that we faced with COVID-19 is that the lockdown has resulted in so many other losses. And to have a loved one, who has passed from COVID, it's not the nicest thing ever, especially if they have gone into the hospital, and the uncertainty of what happens once they enter through those doors. So it's not very easy for relatives at all. And so we have to be mindful of those things. And so it may mean that we have to be creative. We have to find ways in which we can support not only our church members, but probably other community members, and also probably take up the challenge in developing these coping skills in our children, our adolescents, or different, in whatever age group that we can get. Not that it's going to be easy, but grieving a normal process, the coping skills will be there for them to work on and to be able to manage not only loss of life, but the coping skills are very important for stressors that will come their way. So that's one. There are different options for learning and for building our capacity. So the PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, does have tools online that we can access. And these are free tools and free training that we can get. The Red Cross too does that. So we can, have our groups in terms of our counselors, access some of these tools. And I'm sure there are tools that are online that we can all access. And not only that, I'm sure we have expertise in our congregations that can assist us in developing these crisis groups or these grief counseling groups or whatever, our counseling groups that would take on a wide range of areas in terms of counseling. So there are things that we can do. And the fact that we are living in community and we have persons within our communities who need our help. We don't have to limit it to the church, but we can see how we can collaborate with probably our guidance counselors or health professionals, whether mental health or primary health care providers, and see how we can collaborate in getting this, and Red Cross, and see how we can collaborate in getting some of these counseling courses in and giving our people the skills to be able to use them and to be able to build the capacity of our congregants. The other thing that I need to mention is that in terms of getting support, somebody needs help. We have our general practitioners that can refer us. We have the primary healthcare facility as well, because a lot of our congregants may go to clinics, or we may access the primary healthcare service. And I think they are now doing the screenings for depression and anxiety, as well as your other high blood pressure and diabetes screening. And so it is, sometimes we have to speak up to say, I'm not feeling so well, doctor, I'm feeling really down, I'm feeling really sad, and let them see how best they can do the assessment and do the referrals as well. We do have a mental health hotline, or helpline rather, or mental health suicide helpline, suicide prevention helpline, and that's 188-NEW-LIFE. The number is 1-888-639-5433, and that's a 24-hour helpline that we can access so that we can get help for anybody that needs help. So I've put it in the chat so that we are able to access help for 24 hours assistance for persons requiring that type of assistance. Apart from that, the hospitals, the mental health, each region has an assertive outreach team, or we call it a psychiatric emergency team, and they respond to calls as well for persons who are not doing well and need mental health assistance. And that goes through they can either contact the police or the hospitals, and they are able to assist you. So we do have assistance, and I think that getting the church on board will even strengthen the assistance that we have, because we can't reach everybody and the resources are limited. So if we can build the capacity of individuals in the community, it means that we are going to be doing a lot more prevention, and therefore we will reduce the persons who may not have the coping skills to deal with some of the stressors and other traumatic events that will occur. Well, let me thank you for inviting me. I really appreciated it. I really appreciated those persons that share, because it's not very easy. And it's a very difficult period for them. And I know for you as a church, a difficult time as well. And I pray that God will continue to provide strength and the resources necessary so that individuals who are suffering at this time or undergoing some lived experiences that will help others in the future will be able to walk that journey along with the support that they will get, and as well with the coping skills that they would have garnered and would have been practicing. So thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
And thank you too for taking the time to share with us. We are eternally grateful for you coming and sharing with us in such a meaningful way. We also want to say thanks to those who joined us. Over 60 persons were on YouTube and another 20 or so were on the Zoom platform. And for the persons who shared their heart, those who are experiencing grief, who shared their heart, and those who raised questions and shared in the chats, we are really grateful. And we know this is a conversation that needs to continue. It's a never-ending conversation, and we hope we can take it to another level in other ways as we continue to offer ministry. And we have learned so much for those who are grieving and for those who want to offer support to those who are grieving. Thank you so very much. As we bring this session now to a close, we want to leave with you 2 Corinthians 1 verse 3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. God bless you all. We will close with a song. Have a blessed night. Let us continue to support each other.
Every promise we can make, every prayer and step of faith, every difference we have made is only by His grace. Every mountain we will climb, every ray of hope we shine, every blessing left behind is only by His grace. Grace alone, which God supplies, strength unknown He will provide. Christ in us, our cornerstone, we will go forth in grace alone.